Okay, here we are again to talk aviation. You've got Paul Brennan here in the studio, or for what passes as one, in Wellington, and
Martin Noakes in Wellington.
You're back.
I am indeed.
Okay, what did you sort of do your time in Palmerston North?
Did my time and came back to do more time.
And you won't do that again, will you? Otherwise, they'll send you back to Palmerston North for more punishment.
Indeed.
All right, I don't know where to start this time round. Martin, there's so much news about. So let's start locally. Wellington Airport and Air New Zealand and Qantas, they are squawking.
Categorically denying they'll ever use it.
They're saying there is no business case. You're mad to do this. No one will ever come and use it, they're saying.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, as Hamlet once said, what was it that Hamlet said?
She doth protest too much.
Indeed.
And I think people are seeing through that. If you sort of look around, see some of the social media commentary, some of the articles sort of have the slant of, well, of course they would say that in them.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you agree with me on this. The more they complain, the more you realise it's such a great idea. Get on with it and do it.
It is kind of like that. And, some of the arguments, Air New Zealand's obviously not interested. Qantas would never be interested because their whole business case is about funneling people to Aussie to get onto the big metal. So it's highly unlikely that they would use it, certainly not early on. And the City Council is apparently in talks with a number of Asian airlines who might be convinced or persuaded to use the Wellington runway to offer direct flights to Europe. So I think it's going to happen. Yeah,
I think it's going to happen as well. I've always said, and I debate this with people I know quite a bit because they know I'm interested in this sort of thing, build it and they will come is always a bit dodgy, but airports always fit into that category. You're never going to get an airline coming up and saying, please,
raise my landing fees.
Yeah, build a new runway and we really want to come. It doesn't work like that. You've got to put it there first. You've got to show that that the facility's there, it's reliable. And then airlines are looking for routes. They want to fly people to more and more places. And this is not going to go away.
I wonder how long it would be before Air New Zealand starts running A321LR flights to Perth or even 787 flights.
Well, they'll be thinking about
places
that now,
further away. Yeah,
and so they shouldn't. They should be careful what they wish for in that case because there are some opportunities for them. Though to be fair, they'll probably get an A321 off there, to Perth. LR Neo, wouldn't they?
I don't know.
Current length?
They'd probably want the longer runway.
Yeah.
240 people, a lot of fuel.
Here's the other thing, and we've discussed this before. It's never mentioned, but it's true. Asian carriers like good, long, safe runways. They don't like their crews having to battle with any degree of difficulty over and above the normal, do they? They want places that are friendly for the automation to work so they don't have to have a headache at night when they're wondering their crew's coming to Wellington.
To be honest, I think even with 300 metres tacked on the end of it, it's still going to be pretty challenging in some days.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. They want it nice and safe. Yeah.
And that comes into their thinking. You know, like here, it's no worries, we're going in no matter what. They're not so.
But it is quite interesting if you watch the holding patterns over Central Australia. If there's a storm in Melbourne or Sydney, a lot of those early morning Asian arrivals will circle for quite some time out over the desert
for the weather to go. Because they don't want to be battling it.
Don't want the hassle.
They'd much rather burn the fuel.
Yeah.
We're probably just generalising a bit, but that is part of the mix. And when you're deciding to operate a particular place, and if we're looking towards carriers in that part of the world, that will be a factor.
Yeah.
Okay. Another interesting development, and we should have seen this one coming. Again, this is how the market reacts. Philippines start flying an A320 into Auckland via Cairns.
Yep.
Manila, Cairns, Auckland.
Back.
And then not much longer after that, Air New Zealand announced Manila.
Direct.
They must have seen that there was good load factors on that service, and they thought, here's a go, right?
It's a great holiday destination. There's a lot of Filipinos living in New Zealand. Why would you give the business to somebody else?
Yeah.
And you've got a couple of spare 767s knocking around that probably aren't that busy. Keep them busy.
And who's going to take them anyway, right? So you might as well keep them on the books doing that.
Fuel's cheap. They've just been done up. They're nice planes to fly in, so I think they'll do well on that.
I was reading that those winglets added 5% efficiency to them.
Yes.
5%.
Yes, just for a few old winglets, eh?
Yeah, so, and with fuel cheap, it's probably makes more sense to keep them on.
Money in the bank.
But, at the time, I think I can't remember exactly how we commentated on that or the comments we make, but I think the criticism was who would fly all that way in a narrow body? Well, they have, haven't they?
Yes. And it's actually it's actually a flight I'd like to make.
All right, Martin, I want to hit you with a scenario, okay?
All right.
So you're the local international carrier.
That's me.
And you've got this cash cow route that you've been operating for decades now.
Oh, it's golden.
Auckland, LA,
Yeah.
on to London,
Yeah.
whatever.
Pays the bills.
Okay, now also San Francisco now and
Vancouver.
and I think they're going into, where is it, Houston?
Yeah.
As well.
It's all money, mate.
Okay. Now, American Airlines says, hey, we're gonna start flying here again after all these years. We've got these 787s. They're really efficient, and we're going to launch this new product in cooperation with our partners Qantas, One World, $6.99 return, New Zealand, the States, and add $10 any other city in America. Going back the other way, hey, $350 US return, throw in the same amount extra, you can go anywhere in New Zealand or Australia.
Yeah.
To any city.
It's predatory pricing. I don't like it.
No, okay, already you got a problem, right?
Yeah.
You being the incumbent local carrier, international carrier. Your best price that you've ever done is about $1,400 return. And usually it's up around $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 depending the time of year, right? Yeah. The other thing is you're mostly maxed out on load. The only way you can address that price point competition is by lowering the cost of the seats. You can't expand out the seats.
Well, no, there's two options, Paul. There's two options.
Okay, well...
I could reupholster in green and put bird calls through the PA system, which would attract more customers.
Haven't they already done that?
They haven't done the bird calls.
Okay.
I do more bird calls. That's one option.
Yeah.
Not my preferred option. The obvious solution to this problem is to buy those two A380s, which have just had orders unannounced.
Now you're talking, and that's what
They've had orders unannounced. Interestingly enough,
we were announcing them. No, trying to drill down into. Okay, who are those two A380s?
I can't talk about that, Paul. It's
you got an agreement with Airbus, and you've got to coordinate the announcement of that.
I can't go into that.
So you wonder who's purchasing those. People are saying Iran, but that's not enough. They need more than that if they're going to replace their 74s, and do that whole thing that we've been talking about. No. Could I suggest hypothetically that you, being the carrier, would like to consider trying to fly more seats and then lowering your price point for those seats down to where American Airlines is now, which will be the new normal. You watch, it'll be the new normal. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get $1,400 a seat return anymore, by the way. Mm-hmm. It's over. So you've got to fly more seats. You don't have any more seats.
No.
You're maxed out already.
Indeed.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do?
I mean, it's an obvious solution to both of us. That's the only way the airline can go, is to buy those two unannounced A380s. Yeah. However, is 2 enough?
No.
They probably need 3. At least 3 to do a daily return.
2 is enough if you're sticking your toe in the water and they're available early on.
And cheap. All right.
And cheap.
And with the New Zealand 2-class seating system, now they could go to 3 classes and make it fancy. But at the moment, they're sort of 2.5. Economy, premium economy, business, premier.
Right.
They could get an awful lot of seats in that plane.
Okay. And they could match the price.
They could certainly match the price.
And they wouldn't lose any income. In fact, they might gain it because they'll have more seats. And what's the operating cost differential between 777-300ER and the A380? I'm picking it's probably in the 10 to 12 to 15%, 20%, no more.
I'm sure people will put us right in this, because there are people out there who are in the know.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting to know, particularly, and it's a cost per seat. So if you could get an Air New Zealand A380 with upwards of 600 people in it, because you can put your 50 business premier seats up on the top. You can fill the rest of the top of the plane up with your premium economy. So that'd be 150 odd probably. And basically, you've got the capacity of 747-400 downstairs.
So the issue is, for premium seats, the competition is not in that area. The competition is your economy seat at a low price point, right? So you can maintain or not have to compromise at all on the premium product. It's still for sale. It's still as big as it ever was.
It's even
bigger.
It's even more premium because it's upstairs in a very quiet plane.
And maybe you've got actually more space to play with there. You could expand that premium. Down below, it's where you've addressed the price point competition. Okay, a 7878's got how many seats? 260, 270?
Well, United's flying them across the Pacific on 253.
Okay. Bugger all, in other words.
Not many.
And let's say you've got 450 down below.
The economy's down below.
Man.
Yeah, I see Airbus have changed the layout of the rear galley and staircase and
Yeah,
everything.
to accommodate another 14 seats.
Another 14 seats.
So upstairs you've got expanded premium in both classes. What, your business and your
business premier and your premium economy.
Premium economy
with your cozy up seats and all that stuff.
And downstairs you've got this.
Yeah, you got another plane.
Yeah. Where you can meet that price point and actually do better because you can carry more passengers, twice the amount. I bet you it's not twice the amount to fly that machine.
No, certainly not twice the amount, no. And it's quiet. And the mock-ups, I mean, there's a lot of mock-ups already out there. You've done one.
Yeah.
Other people have done them. I tell you, a black A380 does look pretty cool.
Not bad, yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, I can't say that they're going to do it.
No, because it's early days.
It's early days.
There's stuff to sign off and...
I've got to do the paperwork.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what should be happening.
How are you going to take on that price point? That's not just a little bit of a discount. That's halving the historical price.
And there's even more specials out there at the moment that American Airlines is offering from Delta hubs.
What, to combat Delta Virgin?
And all sorts of things, but they're dirt cheap, I tell you. Down to this part of the world, it's shockingly cheap.
Yeah, so, and it's a good deal for both. The other thing is, and we've talked about it before, that aircraft onward to London and back is a great product to be selling in the international marketplace.
It is. The Air New Zealand premium classes are very popular coming out of LA to London.
Flying A380.
I sat next to an American customer once and he says he only flies Air New Zealand to London because he says, A, the price is good, he says the service is great, and he just likes doing it.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, I hope I don't get fired.
We can dream. But seriously, how can you combat, I'll say again, that level of competition?
Paul, it's a no-brainer. And if we were in charge, it would have happened.
Yeah.
But there again, if we were in charge, they'd also have Tupolev 154s because they're probably very cool-looking planes. And
because
you
they
should
look good.
Probably always have a few.
Of course, in New Zealand, got A320s. They've got Airbus people. They work with Airbuses. They fly them.
Oh, yeah.
It's from the same family. The software's the same pretty well. Procedures are the same.
It's the same.
No worries, mate.
It's a bit bigger.
And also for Airbus, good to get a carrier like that on board.
And, I mean, for plane spotters, standing at the end of a runway, watching an A380, it looks like it's being winched down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's another reason he should get it, just for the plane spotters.
Yeah. You've got to think of them too.
You do have to think of the plane spotter.
Well, it's sort of fun to talk like that might be happening, but we know that those planes are not going to Air New Zealand, that none of that's probably happening in reality, but I think we made a good case for it. I think Emirates are taking those too, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Oh, well, just a matter of when.
You reckon? They'll be back. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, gravity will assert itself, let me put it that way.
We can only hope.
Sticking with Airbus, what's all this about all these different weights that they're going to be selling the A350 in? How does that work? Are these mechanical production differences or software rewrites or routines?
It's mainly paperwork. So
Yeah.
the A350 was designed to fly just over 300 people. I think the initial range announced was 8,100 miles or 8,100 nautical miles. And the plane was meant to weigh, I think, 265 tons or 263 tons. But what happened during production or in early production, the weight went up about 3 tons and the range came down to sort of 7,700 nautical miles.
Right.
And the weight was, I think, 268. So now with a bit of paperwork and some research and all this type of thing, they went from 263 to 265, then there was a 268-ton variant, then a 272-ton variant, then a 275-ton variant, and now a 280-ton variant. Now, the 280-ton variant came out when they did that ultra-long-range version for Singapore Airlines. Don't forget, that's flying 170 people from Singapore to Newark.
And the weight is mainly excess waste fuel, right?
It's fuel.
Yeah.
It's fuel. It's sure as, it's not
Gotta
people.
be, yeah.
Although Yanks are heavy, 170 wouldn't make that much difference. Yeah. And this is a plane that's got to allow for up to a 19-hour mission length.
Yeah,
so,
wow. Jeez, yeah.
So they did that. And to get that 280 tons, they had to change things like the fuel draw-off tubes in the tanks and get that all certified. So the available tankage, I think, went from just over 140,000 kilograms of fuel to 165. Then the Philippines came along and said, we want a plane with maybe not that range, but we want to be able to go full So just over 300 people from Manila to New York. So they said, well, we'll give you, I think they gave them a 278-ton version. And so they've taken all these combinations of weights. And then, of course, they've come up with a 260-ton regional variant, which saves them 20 tons.
So basically, any time someone's come to them and said, we need to do this,
they've done
it. It's of a reasonable scale to make it worth it, they'll do it.
They've done it.
Wow.
So now what they're offering is said, okay, the tankage increase is available to everybody now, and we'll give you let's say a 272-ton version, but you won't fill it up all the time, or we can give you a 280-ton version, which you can fill up all the time. If you don't fill it up and use it on shorter sectors, you can put more seats in, less seats, more... And they're covering all the bases with this one plane, and of course they're going to do the same thing with the 1000 when it comes out, because that capability will also be built into that, and if they come up with an 1100 stretch, it'll be a very similar thing. So what's going to happen is this A350 is going to turn into the A330, which is basically turned into the gift that just keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Because that plane has just gone from strength to strength, and the A350 over the next 10, 15, 20 years will benefit from increases in engine efficiency, aerodynamic tweaks, software tweaks, blah, 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 and this plane's just not going to stop. It's getting to the point where Boeing might well be regretting going with a metal fuselage on the 777, the new 777s, because it looks like that 777, the 9 and the 8 might be sort of backed into a bit of a corner. Great planes, they're going to be very successful planes, but the onward development's going to be pretty tricky.
Because you can see with all those different variants of the A350 that as the A330 runs through its product life, that will dissolve out, and they'll finish with that. But all these models will just carry on, and yeah, so...
And how long is, the A330, right, they've just released the Neo 8 and 9. I mean, that's probably got another 20 years in it.
Probably, yeah.
Portugal's just ordered them.
It's interesting that you're not seeing a situation where you've got the A350 cannibalizing the A330. You sort of would have expected that. Because remember when Boeing brought out the 737-300 to be made... as part of the production line. It wasn't to supersede it. It was just another option you could get. Yeah. I can tell you, there weren't too many 737-200s made after that.
No.
It was gone burger,
I mean, I'm sure the A330 for its price has cannibalized potential A350 purchases, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for Airbus, because they're probably making just as much money off the A330, which they can sell really cheaply, and at least the competition's not buying a Boeing.
What they'll do, they would have decided when that product's going to likely end anyway, already, surely.
Yes, but also, if you look at all the analysis for what it's worth, the A350 doesn't really compete with the 787-800, although it could compete with it. It doesn't really compete with the 787-900 because it takes a few more people and can fly a bit further. So what Airbus have quite cleverly done, although I think they were forced into it, I don't know how clever they were at the time, they've rejuvenated the A330 line that interferes very nicely with the bottom of the 787 range.
Yeah.
You got the A350.
Well, it's cut it off at the knees.
It's basically
last program we talked about. They're not making eights anymore.
It's cut it off at the knees. You've got the 787-1000, which is basically it's a regional plane because it doesn't have the huge range of the A350. But then Airbus will just certify the 260-ton version of the A350 and say, well, there's your regional 300-seater. Yeah. And if you need a slightly smaller, shorter range, almost 300-seater, we've got the A330-900, which will do pretty much everything you want, and we can offer it for $25 million cheaper at whatever price Boeing offer.
Because we know that each one of them owes them an extra $30 million that Boeing make anyway.
Because the A330 program doesn't have $29 billion worth of outstanding program cost hanging over its head.
The question is here then, can Boeing, with their 787 product line and coming in with the new 777 models, will they be able to make these very specific market-targeted versions, subsets of particular versions, like Airbus can?
Well, Boeing, of course, are just as smart, if not smarter in some ways. We don't know.
Well, they haven't done this yet. See, these guys have stolen the march.
And Airbus have always done it. It's become front and center of their strategy at the moment, but they've always done it. You had the old A300 ended up at that A300-605, which was a completely different aircraft from the earlier ones, although it looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
So Airbus...
It was basically almost an A320, wasn't it? In the guts, it was their first foray into...
On the tailplane and stuff like that, it was a great plane, and people were surprised how good it was, and that sort of laid the foundation for the A330.
Yeah, totally.
Boeing with the 777... some are saying it's right at the end of its development. It's a 90s plane.
It's a 95 plane, yes.
Yeah. So they've taken... Well, but you could say the same thing with Airbus, but perhaps Airbus went in it with the A330. They went in it with a different philosophy. They planned this in from the very beginning. People don't seem to say the same thing about the 777. So the 777's made a big leap to the 8 and the 9. How much further can they go with that? And the 787, well, you just got to feel. I mean, that's nothing to do with the aircraft, which is a fantastic aircraft. That's all down to, and it's beating a dead horse here, but it's that old the program execution. If they'd got it out when they said they were going to come out, they would have wiped the floor.
They would have been in phase.
Absolutely. And then Airbus would have really struggled to catch up, because don't forget, back in those days, Airbus had made a few missteps. The A340s, good planes, but on the other hand, even then, although they weren't seen as particularly successful, it cost them very little to make, because it's an A330 with another engine on the wing.
It doesn't matter.
It didn't really matter.
It doesn't matter. It's the same plane.
And a lot of people point the finger and say, oh, look how Airbus failed with the A340.
Well,
was it a failure?
Well, no.
No. It wasn't as successful as it could have been if the 777 hadn't been there, but it probably didn't cost them much.
They've sold over, about 1,400 of them now?
They've done well. The 600 didn't do as well as it might have, but again, probably didn't cost them that much.
Well, they already had the thing.
Yeah, it was a lot. The 600s had a lot of changes, but they were successful. Like I said, they probably didn't make them a fortune, but the development costs weren't that high.
Yeah. And again, same fuselage, right? And most of those things, same cockpit stuff, everything.
New wing and slightly different systems, but it didn't cost them anywhere near what a new plane would have cost them.
Most of the stuff in the wing, though, is the same.
And it kept them in the game. It really kept them in the game.
And with the 500 as well.
And then, of course, a lot of those changes and the subtle engineering changes that are not so obvious, they will have filtered back into the A330 program and made that plane even more competitive, because I mean the range of the A330 has essentially doubled.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Yeah, they're from early
days.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it really is interesting. It's an epic battle.
Speaking of Boeing and Airbus, this is interesting. An all Boeing airline is about to buy an all Airbus airline. Alaska Airlines purchasing Virgin America, merger.
That's interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do, whether they sell all their A320 slots.
Because they've got more on order, right?
They've got a whole bunch on order,
yeah.
And they're going to be worth something. Or do they say, we're big enough now, we can run two fleets, and it'd be very interesting for us to run the two fleets and see what the comparison is.
They'd keep the brand separate, would they? Or they're not going to do that? Will Virgin America disappear as a brand?
I haven't read much about that.
Here's my theory. I have a feeling the Virgin brand has run its course. I just don't think it has the factor that it used to have.
Yeah.
All brands run their course pretty well, don't they? Or can.
They do.
And that's very much a brand, a fashion brand. It's set in a particular era. That may no longer mean so much to people.
I know.
Anymore.
And it's very disappointing when brands go, but when they've done their day, when it happens, it happens. I remember the first new PC I ever bought was a Gateway 2000.
Yeah, I remember the Gateways.
With a cowhide covered box.
Yeah, the cowhide. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gutted when that went south.
But there's an example. But
yeah,
that could be a factor.
It might well be. I mean, if I was Alaska Airlines, I'd call it all Alaskan.
When I say that, I'm talking in the context of America, especially, because Virgin's a European brand. It's a British brand. It's associated with, Sir Richard and all of that. And that Cool Britannia thing was big in that era. I just wonder if it...
Yeah.
I'll say it again. It means anything now in modern day America when you've got millennials who know nothing about Richard Branson.
And also, how do brands transfer? For example, Top Gear. So, what did you think of Top Gear? Top Gear, BBC Top Gear, was amazingly successful.
I only think of three guys when I hear of Top Gear, and it's not the new host, it's those three guys.
Top Gear USA was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And Top Gear Australia was just an abomination.
What you're saying is they didn't translate.
They didn't translate, and Virgin, they did very well in America, but they never really took it to the next level, did they?
Yeah. Because their whole thing was great experience, good cabins, great service, really cool, quite good, sharp pricing.
Yeah. But they battled to make money.
Yeah.
Because, of course, at the time you had JetBlue and all these guys started up as well, and they also did real well.
Yeah. Well, they're more established than...
So it's interesting, and people aren't going on, isn't it a pity? Everyone's just like, they've been taken over by Alaska. Yeah. Moving on.
Alaska, very successful carrier. They've been strong for decades.
Yeah, with very little to do with Alaska.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Though they do get out there and fly into weird
yeah.
places with those 737-200s, and of course they've got that great Eskimo guy on the tail.
Yeah, very good logo.
That makes
isn't
it Alaska.
Yeah, it's good looking.
Yeah. But yeah, real survivor airline, Alaska. And do you think they'll keep Virgin America going?
Well, I wouldn't.
Like that?
I'd brand it all up Alaskan, but you never know.
But Airbuses.
Yes,
See,
well...
they have to be careful from Seattle, because if they don't buy Boeing, they'll be seen locally as not supporting the economy and the people of the area.
There has been some talk about that also, because Virgin had a number of Neos on order. Those slots are potentially worth quite a bit of money. So if Alaska wants to recapitalize after the big takeover, they might flog those. On the other hand, they might take the lower cost of operation. They're big enough now, they could easily run 2 fleets.
Speaking of which, see, Delta have gone back for more A321s, huh?
Looks like they have another 25 A321s.
What does that tell you? Well, obviously they like it, but what are they replacing? Those are 757 replacements, aren't they?
Pretty much.
They had 60 of them minimum, so
Yep.
there's a lot to replace.
Yeah, and it looks like Delta might be ordering the C series, which would be great. Yeah, it looks like, like 100, if not
Really?
more. Yes, CS300s, and apparently Delta have also been asking about the 500, which is a 180, 185-seater.
That would be the biggest of the range.
That would be the biggest of the range. It's only in planning at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, so timing's interesting, because remember they restructured the company very recently.
Yes, they did.
And I think the Canadian government is a shareholder. I think one of the major pension funds there is a shareholder. That puts them on a more secure footing. If you're a big carrier looking to make a big order, you probably would have been waiting for that, would you?
Yeah, you would.
Because that also tells you that they can afford to upscale and do that new... They'll probably do that new version.
That will be very interesting if they get the go-ahead to do the 500, because that takes the game right into 737-800 A320 territory.
Bye-bye 737 is all I would say to
You
that.
would have to think that would really put Boeing on the back foot in terms of future
A
development.
180-seater C-Series?
Yeah.
My golly.
That would be pretty scary, because Boeing have essentially lost the 800 above, so the 900's not doing well.
So that just pushes you down into no man's land.
It would, obviously it would hurt Airbus as well, but of course Airbus got the A321, which is a bit of a cash cow for them at the moment. So while they'd be sad to have another competitor, they still would only have one competitor.
Well, that's what I was going to say. They've still got a competitor. It's just not that anymore.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
And the C-Series is, in terms of generations ahead of the 737, it's about 3 or 4 generations ahead of the 737.
Arguably, it's ahead of the A300 series or the A320, A321. It's a much newer design.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes with Pratt & Whitney geared turbofans right off the block. It looks really nice. It's very modern. It's good luck to them.
And still a great family potential from quite short and stubby.
The 100, 300, 500.
They'll probably abandon that short one, won't they?
Yeah, probably. Isn't that funny? And unfortunately...
That's where it started.
Well, they should have probably started with a 500.
Yeah.
But...
Well, it's going to happen now. Delta, huh? So it'll go C-Series and then into the, A320, A321 sort of space.
Yep.
Before they're into the wide bodies.
Yep.
So these will be the regional jets.
Yep. This is also interesting, Delta... Airbus, now C-Series, when Delta have always had a reputation for being very, very conservative and even snapping up second-hand planes if they thought the price was right.
Yeah.
And here they are, potentially going out on a limb with a brand new aircraft type.
But aren't they, they will have a lot of Embraers and...
Well, this is Embraer's to lose. This is the Embraer 2, the second version. It's theirs to lose.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's narrow, you see. The Embraer is only ever 2x2. Whereas C-Series is a little bit wider. And apparently a lot of passengers don't like the Embraer because it feels too small.
Okay.
It's the same reason Americans like to drive V6 cars or V8 cars without any idea what V6 or V8 means.
Yeah.
It's just bigger is better.
Yeah.
If it's wide, it must be safe.
It gets you out of trouble better.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. Okay, so if that happens, it's all good for Bombardier
It is.
and the people of Canada.
The good people of Canada.
Yes. Yeah. See that video of Trudeau explaining the quantum computer?
I did, actually.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Mind you, these guys are briefed by the best.
Yeah.
But
he wasn't.
It was good, though. Great recall.
He was a maths teacher.
Oh, well, there you go. Do you think our Prime Minister would be able to have that explanation of quantum computing off the bat in a classroom situation like that.
No, but he could probably explain exchange rates quite well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, see, Martin, that the final report, and it's been years, has come out into the Egyptair cockpit fire on the ground in Cairo, 777-200. For those who remember it, it was a very intense fire. It destroyed basically the cockpit of the aircraft. The aircraft was a write-off, in fact. But I remember we've talked about this quite a few times in other programs in reference to MH370. And it kind of reminds you that that could have actually been the scenario that happened to that aircraft when you look now at this report and some of the things that it describes and obvious conclusions that it makes. It could have been the oxygen system.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. It happened back in 2011. Luckily, they were boarding, weren't flying yet. The crew was sitting in the cockpit when the co-pilot heard a sort of bang pop sound and a fizzing noise.
Yeah.
And then he noticed that it was on fire. And it turns out, there was a fault in the oxygen feed, and a faulty wiring set the oxygen on fire and burnt basically the whole front of the plane out. But interestingly enough, didn't harm the underfloor avionics bay where the autopilot and everything sits.
That's right, and we've talked about that before too. Could that aircraft continue flying for however many hours it had fuel with a destroyed cockpit but intact electronics bay?
Interestingly, the fire started hard up against the outer skin of the cockpit, burnt several large holes through the outer skin.
Decompression.
30 inches high, pretty quick decompression. The fire might have even gone out at that point, but the plane would have probably been uncontrollable with all the controls melted out. And
certainly not manually flyable in any
No.
way. In fact, it would have been probably locked into the last mode.
Yeah, it would have been all over had that been flying. Luckily it wasn't. Pilot got everybody out, and if you look at the photos in the accident report, which is available online, it's pretty harrowing, if you can imagine that happening in the air.
Yeah, they described it as an intense fire. I think the captain had a go at putting it out with the fire extinguisher, and he said it was depleted the extinguisher with no obvious influence on the fire.
A light yellow flame with a blue tinge.
Right. So, and I was thinking also, maybe if you're flying, you're not going to hear that pop and hiss that or fizzing sound that the co-pilot. He was alerted to not only the hose or whatever malfunctioning, but that was the start of the fire, obviously. So you may not realise that's happened exactly when it's happened if you're flying with all the noise from air.
By the time you noticed that, it would have been too late.
The other thing is, could the hose have let go? And this is, again, what happens. It's a compounded problem, isn't it? The hose has let go.
That's what happened.
And there's been no stripped wire, which has come loose.
There was a terminal block with wires going into it where the insulation had been stripped back a bit.
Yeah.
The terminal block had worked itself loose and shorted against something in conjunction with a failed oxygen hose. Imagine,
though, also you might have a failed oxygen hose like that, not realise that's happened, and light up a cigarette.
Well, that would, Yes. We're assuming they're not smoking in the cockpit?
Well, people do smoke, and every now and then I've seen video of airline pilots smoking happily away, whether or not they're allowed to do it, or, it's late at night and we're in the cruise and, we'll just have a quiet fag, I won't say anything.
Sit back and never smoke.
But you light it up, you don't realise this oxygen hose is detached and oxygen's pouring out of these two bottles down underneath, and boom. The amount of 777s involved apparently with that setup, the way the wiring block was anchored, and proximity to the hose fitting, existed in about 320 some aircraft.
Of the
earlier ones, though there's no information as to if they're the sort of contiguous serial numbers of those, or it's just that bunch of aircraft in the early production cycle. But I see that I think the aircraft MRO, was that the Rego? I think that was about number 400, early 400s off the line. So it's in the zone of that, is all I would say about that.
Yeah. It does show that an oxygen fire is perfectly plausible as a way of disabling the plane. But as we say, the downstairs electronics bay doesn't look too badly damaged.
All right, let's talk about tankers now. Our aircraft of the week will be the KC-135. We're going to talk about that shortly. Absolute legend, and really where actually proper jet passenger travel started, really there.
Pretty much.
And we can talk about that in a moment. But first of all, what's all this about the new 767 tanker program What, more delays?
More delay, yeah. They've had lots of problems.
This thing is, we've been over this. It's not new. They've been making this plane for decades.
That's the opposite of not new. Yeah.
They've been refueling planes in the air with the boom and all of that sort of thing for decades.
Booms apparently are quite hard to develop, and both Airbus and Boeing with their new tanker have had problem developing the booms. The Airbus to the point that they actually lost 2 booms. So
you mean fell off?
They fell off the plane.
Crikey, that's dangerous.
Yeah, luckily nothing was connected up to it at the time. And even on the new Boeing, they have had problems with the boom, and it's too flexible sideways.
Right.
You'd think they've been bolting onto the back of over 800 KC-135s. They'd have solved that problem, but no. Both programs have had all sorts of issues. So not only the boom, they've also had issues with how they control the boom. So just to put it really briefly, the KC-135 got a window in the back of the plane where the boom operator or boomer lies down and manually flies the boom, which has 2 little wings on the end, flies it to the receptacle on the receiving aircraft, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Now, they obviously didn't want to make major structural changes either to the Airbus or the Boeing tanker program. So what they decided to do was put a remote control station up on the main deck using stereoscopic screens. There's even talk of virtual reality goggles.
Okay.
And everything's controlled digitally via screens. This has apparently proven to be very, very difficult. It turns out it's much easier to cut a window in the back of the plane and have an Air Force pilot flying the boom into the receptacle.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah, funny that. And this has been the major delay and the major cost overrun, getting these things to be able to refuel properly.
Okay. But they've imposed a problem on themselves by eliminating or trying to, save the work of...
Cutting a hole in the back of the plane.
Which they know how to do anyway.
It would have... I can understand that there's no structure there for that. They would have had to have added structure. It would have changed the, the flight characteristics of the plane. Yeah. But whatever, it works.
But they were able to put, like in the 7.4, they were able to put the thing in there. And
for one customer.
Yeah, but they still were able to do the installation.
They did
no
it.
Big deal.
Absolutely.
And they've done it for the, obviously, the KC, and they've done it for 707s, haven't they?
Yes.
Israelis have got, and I think the South Africans...
Hose and drogue, they don't have booms.
Okay, well, anyway. But I think a few have been done. Sometimes you can make these things a little too high-tech, right?
Yes, and that seems to be what's happened.
Because the last thing you want is the thing flying off and smashing the plane down below, because you can't work out where the thing is because the vision thing's not working properly.
And that's the advantage of having a guy looking out the back window, is he can actually, or he or she can actually see exactly what's happening all the time. Yes.
I've laid on one of those couches on a KC-135.
Yeah.
It's quite tight space.
Yeah.
If you're a little claustrophobic, you might have an issue.
Maybe it's more of a health and safety issue than anything then, Paul. Maybe they're
no, but
not
you wear
allowed
a high visibility jacket.
You'll be right.
And you're okay.
Yeah. I
mean, the guy can then see you through the windows.
And the KC-10, is it called?
Yeah, the KC-10's got an armchair, sort of like Captain Kirk's chair.
That's great.
And it's got a side stick next to it, and you've got a couple of observer seats next to it, and you can just basically sit there
and fly the boom.
Yeah, and there's this big window that looks out, and you see the planes coming up, and apparently it's an F-16 control system. That's what they told me. Fly-by-wire system for the boom,
Interesting, the US military has to support 2 refueling systems because, of course, the Navy's gone with hose and drogue. And it's only the Air Force uses the boom.
Isn't, though, there a breakthrough a bit now in hose and drogue with the controllability of the basket?
Yeah, potentially by having a highly controllable basket, you can support a bigger hose and you can transfer more fuel.
And there goes the boom problem.
And also the hose and drogue system with this new technology, it'll also be able to fly itself to a certain extent towards the receiver.
So you don't even need a guy to aim it?
No.
They sort of link up, network up?
They'll link up and synchronize and guide each other.
Every time.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the weather, where you are.
I mean, the main benefit for the boom system was for the Bomber Command, or the American version of Strategic Air Command, flying big planes that needed a whole lot of fuel transferred real quick. Yeah, like the boom is
20 or 30,000 pounds in a...
Much faster.
Yeah. And then you've got another one who has to queue up, so they're going to be out of the way quickly.
The advantage of the hose and drogue is you can have 2 planes on each wing.
Yeah, that's right.
And the RAF has got 3, but not that they ever refuel 3 planes at the same time, but 2 fighters can refuel off the wing, but a big plane can refuel off the center line.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Air Force, the US Air Force, when they want to refuel Navy or Marine planes, they have to put a hose and drogue adapter on the end of the boom, which is sort of 3 meters of hose.
It's sort of dumb. What would an A380 tanker be like?
Big.
You could look after a lot of missions.
You'd go up for a week. because, the whole thing would be tank, wouldn't it?
That'd be the thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We've got another idea, another use for it here.
Yeah.
And it's both. It's Airbus and...
Well, Airbus, it looks like Airbus is
problem.
getting on top of it now, but it's taken them, 7 or 8 years to get it working properly. Australia took a long time to accept theirs, but then the Australian military takes a long time to accept anything.
Oh, okay. But was it for that problem, do you think? Must have been.
Well,
planes are
they were an early customer,
plane.
But in the meantime, Australia is interesting is that they've taken an American spec one because they've got F-18s which need the boom.
Oh, right.
The British Air Force, they got theirs into service quite quick, but they've only got hose and drogue.
Right. Yeah, but you get that basket flying, sweet.
You're done.
Yeah.
And it bolts onto the wing. The British planes, the hose and drogue system on the wings can be unbolted,
so
fed
it's just
over.
like a regular airliner when it's off.
They can use them as charter planes in regular commercial service.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, you fill it up with seats, put the overheads back in, you're done.
Sweet.
Mm.
Okay, so on to the aircraft of the day in this episode, the KC-135. It was a speculative program. Boeing built the Dash 80 prototype, rolled out in 1954, I believe. They funded that. That essentially was the KC-135, the 717. Ended up building over 800.
860 odd, yeah.
So a bit of money up front.
Well, it was obviously the barrel roll performed by Tex Johnson that made the Air Force want to buy it.
Yeah.
And they started it in 1955, and by the late 50s, it was refueling planes.
Yeah. And it's, you'd have to say, been incredibly successful machine in Air Force, US Air Force, and, well, not only US Air Force, it went to a few other Air Forces. I think Singapore's got them, French had them, maybe even the Poms used a few along the way. We're up to 60 years almost in service?
Yeah.
They're talking 80 or 90 years by the time they max out on the hours.
Isn't that amazing?
Incredible.
It's
like having the Model T in your inventory still,
I think there's still, over 300, nearly 400 still flying.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean a whole bunch have crashed. It's just that they put them in the desert.
They're in the desert, yeah.
There's
some
dozens of them.
They haven't re-engined all of the old ones, have they? They've parked them with the originals.
Well, there's been 2 re-engining programs. There was the
original turbojet,
which gave the sonic fatigue on the side of the fuselage. Look out for the doublers there; they're really obvious. But then they bought up all the. That's why the 707 suddenly disappeared from global service, because they bought all the airframes up, put them all at David Montham near Tucson, and took all the engines off them, and that was the first re-engineering program.
Okay.
That's why they
JT8s
didn't happen for DC8s. Notice how DC8s carried on.
Yeah, okay.
That's why.
But how many of the other parts from a 707 are interchangeable?
I think the of the early 100 version of the 70, the wing flaps and the spoiler system was basically the same.
Undercarriage?
Probably pretty close.
I've walked around the Dash 80.
I think it's the same undercarriage.
It looks very agricultural, doesn't it? The whole wing looks very agricultural.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, everything. Yeah.
The way those flaps come down to like 85 degrees.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
well, that thing must almost stop in the air.
Yeah. They've got those really sort of first-generation vortex generators all over them.
Yeah.
But they did have outboard, inboard ailerons. They were high speed.
That's always been a Boeing thing, hasn't it?
But the thing was so good at all the missions. They had air-to-air refueling. They did reconnaissance. They did photographic reconnaissance.
Yep.
They had them as airborne command posts.
E6Bs.
They used them as just regular transporters with a cargo door on the front.
Yeah.
Those sort of workhorse for everything.
And fuselage smaller than a 737-800.
I think, probably not as long, but they were narrower.
Yeah.
They abandoned that fuselage width.
It was a few inches. It wasn't hugely narrow, was it?
Well, they had to match the DC-8, I think.
Okay.
Which was going to be wider.
Yeah.
But I've had a good look over a KC-135, one of those R ones, with the CFMs.
Okay.
At one of the air shows I went to. And for its age, I think it was like a 1962 machine. That's like older than me by a year. And it was really good condition.
They look after it, don't they? Yeah.
They've only done an average of 12,000 hours.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And their design life's 38,000. So they've got miles of time to go.
They've hardly flown.
Really, eh?
Yeah. Or not compared to an airline plane. It'd be wrung out by now. It'd be Coke cans.
Apparently the turbojet versions were incredibly slow to take off. Did they do water injection? I think they did.
They did on the civil ones, because it's great watching those old videos on YouTube of a 707 storming down the runway with this just thick smoke coming out the back of
Yeah,
them.
just
But that was a
pouring
very
out.
short-term fix, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, when they got the turbofans on it, the performance improved. But when the CFMs went on, it was like out of sight. New
Yeah.
plane, half takeoff distance, double the weight sort of thing, and obviously more reliable.
And the structure could still take it.
Gosh, CFM must have done well out of the US Air Force.
Yeah.
Let's say there were maybe 600 conversions back in the day.
Yeah.
If there are close to 400 still operating, that's a huge
Thousands of
amount of
engines. Yeah, 2,400
Thousands.
engines,
Yeah.
plus all the spares, plus all the replacements.
Big.
Yeah, no, CFM's done very well out of lots of programs, actually, because they put them on the DC-8s as well, didn't they?
Oh,
They
they
were
did,
CFMs, yeah.
The civil ones, yeah. So
Great looking plane, the big stretch DC-8 with CFMs on it. But
way
anyway,
to go,
we
yeah.
digress.
But of course, they were able to carry on because they weren't bought up by the military.
Nobody wanted them.
Yeah, military just bought every spare one going. I've read the story about it, and still some of those Hulks are in the desert.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, talking about Hulk, you're chasing a Hulk now, aren't you?
Oh, we're getting closer to the Hulk.
Okay.
Got nothing to report concrete,
Yeah.
but we're zeroing in.
It's going to be huge.
Should have some news next program.
Good.
Can't promise. Should have. The KC-135 is dwindling now in service.
Well,
The-
except the fact it might go on for another 20 years, they're saying.
they are talking about operating them to age 80.
Well, there are some operational issues with the 767-based tanker. Extreme long over water missions would mean that if the 767 was full of fuel and lost an engine, it would have to dump fuel and get home, potentially leaving some
what do you do?
F-18s or can you imagine an F-35 with one engine and it'd be stranded. There is talk that they're going to be keeping KC-135s around for specific missions.
Well,
because-
also got KC-10s. They got 3 engines.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but they don't seem to use them as much, do they?
Well, they don't have as many. They only ever built 60.
And they can't land everywhere,
When
can
you've
they?
got 400,
And they are immaculate.
yeah.
They are. They look.
The KC-10s, yeah.
They are immaculate.
Well, they'd be like
The lowest hour DC-10s ever.
they're designed to take over 100,000 hours, right?
Right.
Okay, so they've probably only done about 10, 12,000 hours, something like that.
That'd be a great gig, wouldn't it? Oh, we're going to assign you to a KC-10.
Oh, really?
Sweet.
I actually talked to a KC-10 pilot, one of those things, and when I looked over a KC-10, and he was saying it's like a big Cadillac.
Yeah. I wonder if they've digitized all the cockpits in those.
I don't think so, no.
But they have in the KC-135, right? Well, basic. They've put in
Just a
EFIS
basic
and-
EFIS, yeah. Of course, FedEx have done all the DC-10s to MD-10s, but I don't
MD-10s,
think
yeah.
the Air Force has done them.
No, okay.
Probably
So-
no need.
So they're reading all the. Are they moving tape? The DC-10s.
No, I think they're just your regular dials.
Okay.
Yeah. But you could easily change out the primary flight instruments for EFIS.
Yeah.
All those old 74200s, they did that. They put,
Well, as we
displays and...
as we see more and more now, half the time you see a photograph of the inside of a cockpit, there's a laptop or an iPad sitting there displaying something. So, seems to be the way to go.
Fly it from home.
Yeah.
The aircraft's going to be around for a bit longer, but it'll slowly dwindle away, and that'll be that one.
Yeah.
One of a very successful program for Boeing.
Very successful.
Yep.
Imagine the parts they're still selling. There must be specialised stuff that only Boeing can provide, lifed parts and that.
Must do, yeah. Though they'll be cannibalising now the ones in the desert. Because remember, they're all low hours.
It'll be a bizarre little thing that needs to be replaced on a calendar date, not on an hours flown. It'll be a tiny little bent piece of aluminium for 16K.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you could use a lolly stick for. But
Yeah, for a 1958 machine.
Interesting.
All right, so KC-135, the famous Boeing jet tanker, is our aircraft of
Started out
the
with a
week.
very cool name, didn't it? Stratotanker.
The Stratotanker,
Jeez.
yeah. That's right. To go with the Strato Fortress.
And the Stratojet. What was that?
B-52 was the Strato Fortress, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
It was.
and wasn't it the one before that was the Stratojet?
Stratojet,
The one with the
that was
6
the
engines?
47.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, those were the days. We'll never see bombers like it again, He romantically said.
bombers,
Yeah. Speaking of bombers, they were saying, I was reading that they're sending B-52s over to hit the evildoers now because the B-1s need their engines replacing. So, the old buff is back.
Yeah. Get the old one, lasts longer.
Yeah. All right, that's our program. Slightly longer than usual, and there's a reason for that. We're a little less constrained by time.
Yep.
Because we started off doing this program as a local radio show, and we've outlived the radio station.
We have. We're no longer being broadcast across the valley in crystal clear FM.
It's a bit of a long story, and we sort of feel a bit sad for them, but we'd like to thank the Hut Radio people for accommodating us, and you never know, might be back in the future. But that half hour that we had no choice about, it's gone.
Yep. No constraints.
Yeah, but we're not going to waffle and go too long.
No.
Yeah. So we've got to be professional. Paul Brennan here in the studio in Wellington, and
Martin Noakes, also in the studio.
See ya.
Cheers.